Okay, I already read through quite a bit of this before. Most of this just goes against what Jarvis Thompson said in regards to her argument. This latter part I just want to go to quickly, or I could read the whole thing. I have a time, but I just want to skip to that part. Kind of pointless to waste my time if it's like, because this is just an argument that challenges Jarvis Thompson's argument, a base argument of the right to choose parenthood. So I'll just start here. So we actually get into the argument for the paper. This problem is a result of treating the ethics of abortion as only a question of a right to bodily autonomy. To address this problem, Thompson's argument will need to be revised. So this just by that indication, it's not gonna be a new argument. It's gonna be an updated argument for Jarvis Thompson initial argument. Where is this? I can't even find the eraser button. Undo, and then undo, revise. So this will just be categorized as then what am I doing? I'll start this over again. Okay, so it will be just an updated version of the base argument for Jarvis Thompson. Okay, think about ethics of abortion needs to extend beyond the narrow focus on bodily matters, such as pregnancy, childbirth, and the right to bodily autonomy. Given that abortion is the termination of the costly and risky bodily condition of pregnancy, it is no wonder that thinking about the ethics of abortion focused on the period of pregnancy. However, approaching the ethics of abortion with such narrow focus means inadequately attending to the relevant ethical considerations beyond the term pregnancy. The question of whether to have an abortion does not only concern autonomy over and effects on one body, but also the effect on one's life. Susan Sherwin argues that from a feminist perspective, the profound effects of pregnancy on women's lives and that pregnancy takes place in women's bodies is essential to the moral evaluation of abortion. Sherwin explicitly makes this claim only about women's lives and emphasizes the gender nature of pregnancy by stating gender neutral account of pregnancy are not available. Pregnancy is explicitly condition associated with the female body. Okay, I think I've read this part already. It would just refute that and say that you have transgender and transmasculine people. So they say the better term to use is not to focus on the female body, but birthing persons. I think I want to speed read through most of this because I think I read through some of this already. But presumably, feminist analysis should regard this profound effect on pregnancy on the lives of many. One, that is not just on women, as an important to moral evaluation of abortion. Women's experience on pregnancy matters morally because they experience pregnancy, not because they are women. While most people who have experienced pregnancy are women, not all women can experience pregnancy. And not all people can. All people experience pregnancy. So, for example, we have transgender men, our transmasculine men. I think this is a good separation to make because during a debate, someone could ask you what a woman is, and that would just be a convoluted argument on semantics to which you have to then justify why a cluster of other related feminine traits is going to make somebody a feminine person or male, whatever it is. So it's better just to say birthing persons because we're just talking about people who experience pregnancies. To just go past all that convoluted conversation where someone tries to get you on some sort of point. There is no reason to think that the experience of pregnancy for transgender men or transmasculine men does not have profound effect on their lives, or that the effect are not important to moral evaluation of abortion in the cases where pregnant person is not a woman. So the perspective that pregnancy has profound moral relevance effect on a pregnant person's life applies to anyone who can be pregnant, not only women. So that's going to be the main point right there. And then where's the highlighter? So the main point of this whole thing right there is going to be that. I keep confusing the highlighter with a pen. Okay, the problem with the Sherwin perspective is that it conflates gender with sex by By claiming that no gender-neutral account of pregnancy is available because pregnancy is a condition exclusive to female bodies, and speaking only about the effects of pregnancy on women's lives, Sherwin conflates the gender category of women with the biological sex category of female, but the distinction between gender and sex has long-standing importance in feminist thought, especially in the critique of biological determinism. If in the context of pregnancy and abortion, women are understood to us as female bodies, then to be a woman just means to be a female, and so womanhood is biologically determined. If it is hard to see how Sherwin's perspective can count as feminist, one of it implies biological determinism. A defensible analysis of pregnancy and abortion will not imply biological determinism. Contra Sherwin, there must be a gender-neutral account of pregnancy available. If no gender-neutral account is available, there is no account of pregnancy that accounts for both women pregnancies and non-pregnancies. Non-women pregnancies, such as gender men or trans-masculine people, pregnancy is available. But if no such account is available, then any account of pregnancy will fail, as there will become an instance of pregnancy for which it does not account. For instance, a non-gender neutral account of pregnancy which only accounts for women pregnancies fail to account for non-women's pregnancies. So either a gender-neutral account of pregnancy is available or no successful account of pregnancy is available. There must be some successful account of pregnancy available, and the said people who can experience pregnancy include both women and some non-women. So there must be a successful explanation that account for the experiences of both women and non-women. So there must be a gender-neutral account of pregnancy available. That is just one LARP of text that could just be explained in 5 lines. Because a gender-neutral account of pregnancy is available, and pregnancy have effect on the lives of anyone who is pregnant, regardless of gender. I reject Sherwin's perspective due to its exclusion of non-women experiences. Okay. Instead, my perspective is inclusive of all those who can experience pregnancy. I regard pregnancy as having profound effects in the lives of anyone pregnant. It takes place in not just women. In regards to these effects as important to the moral evaluation of abortion, including the case of abortion where a pregnant person is not a woman. One of the most important effects of pregnancy in a person's life is the creation of the prospect of undertaking parenthood. Okay, we're at our second point. This prospect can have enormous consequential effects on a person's life, so it is something morally considerable or ethically considerable to the question of abortion. This is not to suggest the right to bodily autonomy is not an important consideration to abortion, or that a bodily autonomy does not matter. Instead, it is to say that there are further considerations in addition to the right to bodily autonomy relevant to thinking about the ethics of abortion that are ignored in one narrowly focused on the term pregnancy. To have a broader and more complete picture of what matters when thinking about the ethics of abortion, the set of considerations taken to be relevant must include the prospect of undertaking parenthood. The prospect of undertaking parenthood has life-changing implications. As such, there are certain kinds of moral rights that people have that are pertinent to this prospect. A pertinent kind of rights are what Andrew Shendon calls self-rights. Self-rights are those rights that concern the sort of claims that constitute our general authority over ourselves. This general authority concerns the claim that people have over their self-formation. This project of self-formation includes what a sort of social roles, relationship, responsibilities people take on as they endeavor to author the stories that is their own lives. For Shendon, the right to bodily autonomy is both a self-right and a property right, because we have both kinds of claims over our own bodies. The self-right relevant to the prospect of undertaking parenthood is the right to choose parenthood. Okay. The right to choose parenthood is people's self-right to choose to take the step to what would result in them becoming parents. If it is people's right to make the choices and decisions relevant to the projects and process towards the end of becoming a parent, it is related to people's reproductive freedom to rediscover for themselves whether becoming parent or creating a new token relationship of the type parenthood, such as the case of people who are already parents, in something they want to see or engage in the project of self-authorship. which includes the capacity to define and form one's identity, sense of self, social relationships. This right to choose parenthood is a self right because it concerns the claim about our general autonomy over our self formation, namely whether to undertake the personally, socially, economically, legally, and morally significant endeavor that is parenthood, and includes decision making right concerning the beginning, constitution, continuation, or termination of the process towards becoming a parent. By parenthood, I do not mean here a mere biological relationship. Of course, anyone who procreates has, in biological or genetic sense, become a parent because they have genetic but normative genetic or oh my god is biological or genetic but normative. This sense of parenthood has to do with those particular social roles, norms, and responsibilities concerning raising and taking care of children. Mere biological parenthood is neither necessary or sufficient for normative parenthood. This is because there are parents who have no biological or genetic relationships with their child, and biological progenitors who are not parents to their offspring in a normative sense. Adoptive parents are an example of the former, and sperm donors are an example of the latter. This is not to say that biological connection has no significance for parenthood. While it is not necessary or sufficient for parenthood, the biological process of procreation is the most common way people become parents. Who is and is not differentiated as parent or is socially dependent because it depends upon social norms that tie biological reproductive processes to the social roles, relationships, and responsibilities. It is the social significance that is given to the biological process rather than biological process itself that makes it relevant for who is a parent. We can imagine a society where the role of parent is assigned to, say, those deemed to have the greatest child-rearing skills. In such a society, parents are distinct from biological progenitors. The social norms that concern who is a parent in such a world do not take biological connection to be a factor. Thus, biological connection only have significance for parenthood contingent upon such connections have concerned social significance. Parenthood is thus ultimately to be understood in social rather than biological terms, as constructed by social norms about who has the right and responsibilities for child rearing. Also consider the other ways people typically become parents. Adoption. Adoptive parents are parents even if they have no biological connections with their children. This is because there is a socio-legal norm that governs the social practice of adoption, which means that people who adopt are parents. This further shows that why parenthood is ultimately to be understood in a social rather than mere biological term, because biological connections are only meaningful for parenthood if there are social norms that treat it as something meaningful for who is a parent. Deciding whether to have an abortion is a large part of a question to decide on whether to undertake parenthood. This is because not having an abortion will likely mean that one will become a parent. The prospect of becoming a parent underscores the moral significance of not aborting a pregnancy. As Elizabeth Harman states, creating a person always involves occurrences of great moral worth. Not only does the pregnant woman's own life change, but her moral responsibilities to others change as well. The most pertinent change comes as a result of becoming a parent. Failure to abort a pregnancy has moral significance, partly because it likely brings about the significant moral relationship that is parenthood. There are many reasons that someone might want to avoid undertaking parenthood. Perhaps one is not in a financial position to raise a child. Perhaps one feels insufficiently mature to raise a child or does not want to take those responsibilities. Perhaps one simply does not ever want to raise a child or children. In any case, by choosing to abort, one is deciding to avoid taking on a particular social role, a set of responsibilities, and a new social relationship. Respecting people's right to choose parenthood means respecting their decision regarding taking on role of parents. Because of the right to choose parenthood concerns the choice of whether to take or continue to take steps towards becoming a parent, it is important to understand the kind of choices being made and when it can be made. Obviously, it is not a choice in the sense that one is simply declared they can choose parenthood and thus become a parent. Instead, the relevant choice is actually a series of choices and decisions made as a part of the project and process of becoming a parent. Consider two aforementioned ways people most commonly become parents: biological progenitation or adoption. As mentioned, both ways are to be understood in social terms because the social norms dictate whether either has any meaning for people becoming parents. Both are processes that require a series of choices, decisions throughout, at the end of which the result in becoming a parent. In the case of a male and female agreeing to have a child through biological progenition and having unprotected sex with a goal in mind, the choices and decisions are different from male and female simply due to the fact about human reproduction. Both parties have decision-making power when it comes to agreeing to engage in sexual intercourse for the purpose of reproduction and becoming parents. It is within both male and female rights to agree to try to become parents this way. However, once the female is pregnant, the relevance of the male's right to choose parenthood is exhausted because there is no further choices or decisions that will be made. Did I guess that right? Oh, to this way. Okay, that answered the night question though. Both parties have a decision-making power when it becomes agreeing to engage. Okay. Oh wait. Both parties have some power to reproduction become. It is within the male and female right to agree to become parents this way. However, once the female is pregnant, the relevance of the male's right to choose parenthood is exhausted because there is no further choices or decisions within the male right concern biological reproductive processes. As mentioned, exercising the right to choose parenthood is about the choice and decisions people make and the project and process of becoming parents. When the method of becoming a parent is through unprotected sex, there is an asymmetry in the set of choices and decisions between male and females. While both can consent to unprotected sex with the goal of having a child, the female can consent to gestation and childbirth because the male is not capable of becoming pregnant and giving birth. Okay, well, both are when both are a method, it's a merely set of choices. Okay, so the choices and decisions a male can make that are instances of exercising his right to choose parenthood in a situation where parenthood would emerge through biological progenition are whether to agree to unprotected sex, whereas the female has this choice but also the choice to continue pregnancy and go through childbirth. So while both male and females have the right to choose parenthood when it comes to becoming a parent through the biological progenition, the asymmetrical nature of biological human reproductive processes means there is a symmetry with what choices and decisions are relevant to the exercising of one's right to choose parenthood. Okay. At this point, we may ask whether the male autonomy over the decision to undertake parenthood would extend into the term pregnancy. This would present a problem where it would seem that the male has autonomy over the female's pregnancy. Imagine a case where after a female has already become pregnant, the male partner no longer wishes to be a parent. It would seem that if the male has a right to choose parenthood, might be within his right to make choices regarding the female continuing her pregnancy, which seems like it undermines the female's autonomy. In such a case where it appears two people's right to choose parenthood seems to clash, any conflict is readily resolved by considering each other's relevant rights. In arguing for the relevance and significance of right to choose parenthood to the ethics of abortion, I do not argue that the right to choose parenthood supplements or supplants other relevant considerations, such as the right to bodily autonomy. What? At this point, we may ask whether the male autonomy over the decision to undertake parenthood would extend into the term of pregnancy. This would present a problem where it would seem that the male has autonomy over the female's pregnancy. Okay, understand that, Ben. Imagine a case in which after a female has already become pregnant, the male partner no longer wishes to become a parent. Okay, understand that. It would seem that if the male had a right to choose parenthood, it might be within his right to make the choice regarding the female's continuing her pregnancy, which seems like it undermines the female autonomy. In such cases where it appears that two people right to choose parenthood seems to clash, any conflict is readily resolved by considering each party other relevant rights. In arguing for the relevant significance of the right to choose parenthood to the ethics of abortion, I do not argue that the right to choose parenthood supplants other relevant considerations, such as the right to bodily autonomy. I have no idea what I mean by supplant. Oh. Supplant, supersedes or replace. No, I have an idea what I mean. Okay, I do not argue that the right to choose parenthood supersedes other relevant considerations such as the right to bodily autonomy. The right to choose parenthood is relevant and significant as it is the right to bodily autonomy. And what I argue does not simply imply otherwise. So when the male and pregnant female right to choose pregnancy, choose parents, relevant significance in bodily autonomy, and what I argue does not simply imply otherwise. So when the male and pregnant female rights to choose parenthood are at odds, it is the pregnant female's body that is used and occupied, meaning that the pregnant female's right to bodily autonomy is relevant, because in this case where male's right to choose parenthood is at odds with a pregnant person's right to choose parenthood, the male autonomy does not extend over the female's pregnancy because it is her body that is being used and occupied. Okay, I understand that. Not his. Thus, the pregnant female has a claim to her body, and her right to bodily autonomy functions as a tiebreaker, so to speak, in such cases where rights conflict. A potential consequence of what I say is that it's less clear how unwilling prospective fathers can be held responsible for child support. For example, if a male and female have consented to unprotected sex but not for the purposes of having a child, the female becomes pregnant and chooses to go through with it. How could the male be held responsible for child support given that he did not consent to becoming a parent? A female consenting only to unprotected sex does not entail consenting to gestation or consenting to parenthood, so neither should a male consenting only to unprotected sex entail consenting to parenthood. Similar arguments have been made by Stephen D. Hale, Sally Sheldon, and Elizabeth Brake, 2005. All of whom argue that unwilling fathers should not be obligated to provide child support. Further, Ezio de Nuke 2014 argues that prospective mothers can sometimes wrong prospective fathers by bearing children. On the contrary, Peter Alwar 2012 argues it is not unfair to an unwilling father that their pregnant female partner does not abort a pregnancy. An unwilling father still have parental support obligation, because an obligation to aid falls upon any parent who intentionally and knowingly creates those circumstances of need. While this issue is interesting, I leave it entirely open whether unwilling males have consented to fatherhood or unwilling fathers are responsible for child support, for it is a minor point in the context of my thesis, and I direct interested readers to these other discussions on the issue. In the case of a couple seeking to adopt, both parties have equal say in the matter. Supposing they meet the criteria for becoming prospective adoptive parents, they begin a process of finding a child or children to adopt, such as through adoption agency. Prior to anything being finalized, the seeking parties may change their minds and decide they no longer wish to adopt because they no longer wish to become parents. In the case where only one party wishes to adopt and the other no longer so wishes, it is within the no longer interested party to choose parenthood to withdraw from the process. For the project of a couple adopting a child requires willingness of both individuals. In the case of a single prospective adoptive parent, the decision, the withdrawal lies entirely with that person. By looking at two common ways people become parents, it is evident that becoming a parent is a process that involves a series of choices and decisions. Throughout this process, there are points where people must decide whether or not they will continue. If they continue to process completion, they become parents, and if at some point they change their mind and end up in the process somehow, then they do not. The process to choose parenthood is the right to make the choice and decisions relevant to this process, including beginning and continuing and termination. Taking the right to choose parenthood seriously allows for an argument for the permissibility of abortion that is independent of right to bodily autonomy. Following Thompson's reasoning about the contours of a right to life, a fetus's right to life does not entail a right to have anyone enter parenthood against their will or surrender their right to choose parenthood and become a parent to the child that the fetus would become. Pregnant persons have self-right claim to decide for themselves whether to begin or continue to take steps towards something as life-changing as becoming a parent, independently of the pregnant person's right to bodily autonomy. Abortion is permissible because a fetus' right to life does not entail a right to encroach on anyone's choice to undertake parenthood or have them surrender their self-rights. And so choosing to avoid parenthood by having abortion does not violate a fetus's right to life because it does not deprive a fetus of anything it has a right to in virtue of having a right to life. Okay, I'm gonna ask for a summary, okay? There's no point in going on if I don't understand. A breakdown of some sorts. How much have I read? Jesus Christ. I'm scrolling up and scrolling up. I'm like, oh my god, when does this end? Now I'll need to find... Thinking. Explain the relevance of text and what it's arguing and how it makes a distinction between parenthood and bodily autonomy and what the core idea is of the copied and pasted text. While that does that, I'll be gone for a while. I'm back. Okay. Yeah, I'll just make it read it, to be honest.
Here's a clean breakdown. Victim. What the passage is arguing, in plain terms. Bodily autonomy only defenses of abortion are too narrow. Thompson's famous violinist-style argument focuses on the right not to have one's body used. The author says we also need a second, independent lens. That second lens is a self-right to choose parenthood. Drawing on Andrew Sneddon, they treat some rights as about self-formation, authoring your life roles and responsibilities, deciding whether to undertake the social role of parent, not merely producing a biological offspring, is one of those rights. Parenthood is normative social, not just biological. Adoptive parents are parents. Sperm donors typically aren't, normatively speaking. Biology matters only because of social norms that attach duties roles to it. Therefore, abortion can be permissible even if we set bodily autonomy aside. A fetus's right to life does not include a right to force someone into the social role of parent or to surrender their self-right of life authorship. Why this is relevant? It widens the standard debate. Abortion isn't only about the body, pregnancy, gestation. It's also about the life-altering role of becoming a parent. It clarifies conflicts. If a pregnant person and a partner disagree, both have a right to choose parenthood, but bodily autonomy is the tiebreaker because the pregnant person's body is the one being used. It includes everyone who can be pregnant, trans-inclusive, gender-neutral, avoiding conflating sex and gender, while keeping focus on the lived impact of pregnancy on anyone who experiences it. The distinction it draws, parenthood versus bodily autonomy. Right to bodily autonomy equals control over use, occupation of your body, gestation, childbirth. Right to choose parenthood equals control over adopting the normative role of parent, social duties, responsibilities, identity-shaping commitments. In pregnancy, both rights matter. Aborting can be justified because A, you can refuse bodily use, and B, you can refuse to be made a parent. The author's key move is that B stands on its own. You don't have to lean only on A. Core idea in one breath, open quote. Abortion is morally permissible, not only because no one may use your body without consent, but also because no one has a claim to conscript you into the social role of parent. A fetus's right to life doesn't include that power. Close quote. Argument map. Compact. 1. People have self-rights over their self-formation, life roles, responsibilities. 2. Parenthood is a profound, life-defining social role, not merely a biological fact. 3. Abortion decisions centrally concern whether to undertake that role. 4. A fetus's right to life doesn't entail a right to make someone a parent against their will. Therefore, abortion can be permissible independently of bodily autonomy considerations. Notes and implications. The passage flags gender versus sex, critiques accounts, e.g. Sherwin, that speak only about women, and argues for a gender-neutral analysis so it applies to all pregnant people. Conflict cases. If a non-pregnant partner wants or doesn't want parenthood, their right doesn't extend to controlling the pregnant person's body. Bodily autonomy decides the clash. Child support puzzles. If parenthood is a chosen role, do unwilling fathers owe support? The passage surveys views and leaves this question open. It's ancillary to the main thesis. If you want, I can turn this into a one-page study sheet with the argument map, key terms, and sample objections replies.
Okay, there you go. Guess I understand, but I don't really understand what parenthood is. Look. I understand parents is like taking on the social norms or social responsibilities in regards to parenthood. But again, I don't understand what parenthood is. Like, oh, the moral nature of parenthood. At this point, we may ask how this is meant to address the analogy between abortion and infanticide. If a right to life does not entail a right to encroach on anyone's choice of whether to undertake parenthood, and the right to choose parenthood includes the right to have an abortion to avoid undertaking parenthood, would a parent's right to choose parenthood not also include the right to commit infanticide or of the newborn if they decide they no longer want to parent it? If it is permissible to kill a fetus because one does not want to undertake parenthood, then why is it impermissible for a parent to commit infanticide of their newborn if they want to stop being its parent? The answer lies in the moral nature of parenthood. Birth creates a new moral context, not only because a person's body is no longer occupied, but also because new relationships emerge. Lindy Porter characterizes this moral context as one in which the newborn is in various relationships with several people, including its family members. For Porter, these relationships mean that choices concerning what to do with or to the newborn would not belong solely to the person who birthed it. The other person with whom the newborn has a relationship changes the moral context, such as the choices concerning what to do with or to the newborn will also depend on their input. Regarding the choice to commit infanticide of the newborn, the moral context surrounding such a choice will always be different from the context surrounding the choice to have an abortion. For this reason, fetuses and newborns will never be in the same moral context. One cannot generalize from the moral status of abortion to that of infanticide. While Porter takes the difference to be in the moral context in which the fetus and newborn exist, more must be said about specifically what these contexts is. Context different if it is to be shown that the situation of abortion is disanalogous with the situation of a parent committing infanticide of their newborn, such that the former is permissible and the latter not. Porter specifies the importance of relationships as one differentiating factors, and given the example of relationships between family members, but does not further specify how particular relationships affect moral context or how they go beyond including more parties in certain making processes. Specifically, it is the moral nature of parental relationships that most significantly differentiates pre-birth and post-birth context. Parenthood is a relationship between parent and born child, and one that is entangled with moral responsibilities. No one can be a parent if they do not have any born child. So if someone is a parent, they must have a born child. Someone argued that the relationship between parent and a born child is an extension of a relationship that emerged at conception, such as the pregnant person counts as a parent to their fetuses, which counts as their child, blah blah blah. But this is mistaken. Pregnant people and the fetus participate in progenitor offspring relationship as distinct from parent-child relationships. This is because childbirth is when the child comes into the world and parental responsibilities are towards born children. To see why, consider the following argument against the view that pregnant people are parents to any fetuses they carry. Those fetuses are their children. Parents have responsibilities to take care of their children's well-being, such that harming them by seriously impairing them is wrong. If pregnant people are parents to any fetus they carry and those fetuses are their children, then they have parental responsibilities towards those fetuses. If they have parental responsibilities towards any fetuses they carry, then it would be wrong for a pregnant person to harm any fetus they carry by seriously impairing them. Consider the responsibility to refrain from consuming alcohol during pregnancy. We might think that it's wrong to consume alcohol during pregnancy because doing so seriously impairs the fetus by giving it fetal alcohol syndrome, but such harm to the fetus is not what giving a fetus Such harm to the fetus is not what makes fetal alcohol syndrome wrong. Instead, it's wrong because it will cause detrimental harm to the future born child. But if there is no harm to the future born child, then giving a fetus fetal alcohol syndrome is not wrong because it is the harm to a future born child that is constitutes its wrongness. Imagine a scenario where a fetus is for some reason unviable and will die before it reaches term. This means that there is no future born child. Wait. Wait. There's something that struck me. That one rebuttal thing went out. The one rebuttal with the teleporter thing. Again, I'll ask. No, my mind's swerving off to something. In this case, the pregnant person has not done something wrong because they do not do anything that causes harm to the future born child, as they will never be any future born child to suffer harms. So it would not be wrong for a pregnant person to consume alcohol during a pregnancy in which they carry an unviable fetus that will die before it reaches term, to give that fetus alcohol syndrome, because while doing so seriously impairs the fetus, it does not harm a future born child. If a pregnant person is a parent to any fetus they carry, then in cases of pregnancy where the fetus is unviable and will die before it reaches term, the pregnant person is the parent of the unviable fetus they carry. If pregnant people are the parents to unviable fetuses they carry, then they have parental responsibilities to take care of the fetus's well-being, such that they are doing something wrong if they seriously impair them. Given an unviable fetus alcohol syndrome seriously impairs a fetus, if a pregnant person has parental responsibilities to any unviable fetuses they carry, then it is wrong for them to harm any unviable fetuses they carry by giving it fetal alcohol syndrome. But as explained, giving a fetus alcohol syndrome is wrong because it causes harm to a future born child, not because it harms the fetus. Because in the case of an unviable fetus, there is no future born child to suffer the harms. The criterion for wrongness cannot be met, and so it is not wrong for a pregnant person to give unviable fetus they carry fetal alcohol syndrome. If it is not wrong, then pregnant people do not have parental responsibilities to any unviable fetuses they carry. If pregnant people do not have parental responsibilities to any unviable fetuses they carry, then they are not parents to any unviable fetuses they carry. If the relationship between parents and born children is an extension of relationship that emerges at conception, is they carry but a parent. Therefore, the relationship between people with their fetuses is not parenthood, meaning it's not the case that their relationship between the parent and born child is an extension of relationship that merge at conception. Some pregnant people think of themselves. Some pregnant people still think of themselves as parents, and the fetuses they carry as their children, and refer to fetuses as unborn children. From their perspective, they become parents once they conceive, and take fetuses to be continuous in identity with born children, and so their relationship with any fetuses they carry to be parenthood. While people may have tremendous emotional attachment to their relationship with fetuses they carry, it does not follow that this relationship is parenthood. This is simply because no one can be a parent if they do not have a child, and no one can be a parent to a child that does not exist. In a case of a pregnant person who does not have any born child, they are only a potential or prospective parent rather than an actual one. This is because fetuses are only potential children and not actual ones, because they still need to go through the gestation process and to be birthed or born. For example, a planted seed is not seeding though it may be in the process of becoming seedling as it goes through the process of germination. Tomato seeds are not unplanted tomatoes, they are seeds with potential to grow into tomatoes. Just as the seed must complete a process of growth and development for tomatoes to be fruits, fetuses must complete the process of growth and development for children to be born. Fetuses thus have potential to become children but are not children, and so are not unborn children. If, however, we think that fetuses are unborn children, continuous in identity with born children, then we must think that a tomato seed or tomato seeds are tomatoes. But tomato seeds are not tomatoes. So fetuses are not unborn children, continuous in identity with the born children. Further, one is not the owner of a plant, owner of a tomato plant, and is not in owner plant relation with a tomato plant simply because they have planted the seed at the time of planting the seed, and while it's still growing, one is only a potential owner of a tomato plant. Similarly, a pregnant person is not a parent of virtuous in the virtue of being pregnant, for their child has yet to be born. If we think that pregnant people are parents to any fetuses they carry, then we should think that someone who only owns tomato seeds owns tomatoes in virtues of owning seeds. But owning tomato seeds does not imply owning tomatoes, so pregnant people are not parents to any fetuses they carry. Thus, birth is morally significant transition point because parenthood is a relationship parents have with their born children, not a relationship pregnant people have with unborn fetuses they carry. It is born children that fetuses at which moral concern is ultimately directed towards when it comes to take care of pregnancy. Any responsibilities there may be regarding the taking care of a pregnancy are ultimately for the sake of the future unborn child, future born child well-being, not the fetuses, because there is yet to be a born child, and the relationship between the pregnant person and the fetus they carry is not a relationship between a parent and a child. And any responsibilities a pregnant person may have regarding taking care of their pregnancy will not be parental responsibility. The time of the child's birth is the earliest anyone can be a parent, and thus the earliest they can have parental responsibilities towards them. As Andrew McGee states, birth marks the moment of our offspring coming into the world, the special moment of childbirth, and the joy of holding your son and daughter for the very first time are monumental events in human life. It is at this point so much of our responsibility towards them, or very life with them truly begins. While some cases of parenthood may begin much late after the child is born, such as in the cases of adoption, the first time of birth is the earliest point from which parenthood and parental responsibilities can begin. So it is not an extension of a a relationship that emerges at some prior point, such as conception. I need to give me a second. Okay. Where am I? Similar cases of. Okay. While some cases of parenthood may begin much late after the child is born, such as in the case of adoption, the time of birth is the earliest point from which parenthood and parental responsibilities can begin, so it is not an extension of relations that emerges at the prior point, such as conception. Similarly, for cases of planned adoption, prospective adoptive parents are not parents prior to the birth of the child they will adopt. Prior to the childbirth, they are only prospective parents rather than actual ones. Even when all the relevant legal work is done beforehand, the child still needs to be born for an actual relationship to begin between it and its adoptive parents because to become a reality. If any responsibility a pregnant person may have to take care of the pregnancy are not parental responsibilities because the relationship between the pregnant person are not parental responsibilities because the relationship between pregnant person and any fetus they carry is not parenthood. Then what sort of responsibilities are they? These responsibilities will be hypothetical imperatives dependent upon some and requiring that the pregnancy be taken care of. If a person aim in going through a pregnancy is to become a parent, then they would have responsibilities to take care of the pregnancy. As doing so best serves their end. Surrogates are another example. A surrogate is responsible for taking care of their pregnancy because doing so requires to achieve the goal of allowing the party they are surrogate for to become parents. But if there is no end that requires the pregnancy to be taken care of, then a pregnant person would not have any responsibility to take care of their pregnancy, including any responsibility not to terminate it. Because being a parent entails having specific moral responsibilities concerning the reason of one's children. Parenthood is something that places responsibility upon those who undertake it. Undertaking parenthood is analogous to promise making. Okay. Just in the sense that both create obligations where previously there were none. Genuine promise create obligation for those who make them. There is no obligation to make any given promise, but once a promise is made, there is an obligation to keep it. Undertaking parenthood is similar. There is no obligation to become a parent, but like a promise maker, one is obligated to meet certain responsibilities bestowed upon them once they undertake parenthood. The person who chooses abortion does not undertake parenthood and so does not have to obligate themselves, much like the person who does not obligate themselves to keep a promise by not making a promise in the first place. Once someone is a parent, they are obligated to meet the responsibilities of parenthood, including handling the well-being of their children and raising them in loving, caring, and nurturing way, meaning depriving them of the resources necessary for their survival would be impermissible. While a parent maintaining a right to their resources, they also have a responsibility to ensure the well-being of their newborn, and so the permissibility of infanticide via deprivation is ruled out. Reasoning similar to the Thompson, it would be permissible for a pregnant person to have an abortion because a fetus right to life and does not entail a right to have right to have anyone undertake parenthood and become parents. The child and that fetus will become or surrender their self rights, including including their right to choose parenthood. But it would be impermissible for a parent to commit infanticide of their newborn because once they have undertaken parenthood, they are obligated by parental responsibilities, including the responsibility to care for the well-being of their newborn, which precludes infanticide. Thus, an argument from the right to choose parenthood is able to maintain that abortion is permissible and infanticide is not. This demonstrates the ethical relevance and significance of the life-changing decision to undertake parenthood and the right to choose parenthood to the ethics of abortion. By reconsidering the prospect of undertaking parenthood and the right to choose parenthood as considerations relevant to the ethics of abortion, the range of considerations taken to be relevant to the ethics of abortion expands beyond the narrow focus on bodily matters and the right to bodily autonomy, giving a broader and more complete picture of what matters to thinking about the ethics of abortion. Oh, it just goes through objections. Okay, I'll read through these objections. Sometimes when I go through the objections that some authors put, it gives more clarification on what their argument is. Where am I? 20 pages. I'm way too far. Okay, the birth strategy objection, because this account of this analogy between abortion and infanticide depend on the moral significance of parenthood, and parenthood is a relationship between parent and born children for which the time of birth is the earliest parenthood can begin. This account takes that birth to be morally significant. As such, it belongs to a family of views that take birth to make morally significant differences for the moral status of both fetuses, newborns, and abortion, and infanticide. Examples of arguments. I should add birth. This is good. I should add birth. What should it do? Birth. I should add birth as one of those argument based like tags, because sometimes there are arguments from just birth. Where is it? Birth to be morally significant. Copy and paste. Where is this? Somewhere. I forgot how to. Okay. How do I add tags? Remove this. Create a post. How do I make a post? New argument. Wait, is this mean I can? Oh, I can edit it. Edit. Challenge post regards invite. Okay, there you go. Still new to this. Birth. Okay, there you go. I wouldn't consider this a new argument, though. I'd change the tags of this. Edit post, edit tags, Gonna be abortion, yeah. But gonna be an updated argument. Okay, there you go. All right. Birth to be more significant. I created that tag. Now, arguments that have some sort of birth involved. I'll change the tag, the name to be more suitable because birth is a bit of a interesting argument, like tag to use. This account takes birth to be morally significant. As such, it belongs to a family of views that take birth to be morally significant difference for the moral status of fetuses, newborn, da da da. I wonder if I could change, add definitions for tags. Maybe I'll edit again. Alright, there you go. Okay, there you go. There's some other things. As such, it belongs to a family of views that take birth to be morally significant difference for moral statuses of both fetuses and newborns, and abortion and infanticide. Examples of arguments from this perspective can be found in these arguments over here. Christopher Boiber and Adam, can't pronounce that, call this group of views the birth strategy. No, that's what the tag's gonna be. The birth strategy. The tag for these arguments are gonna be called birth strategy. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Okay. Let me just change this tag. Birth strategy. Save. Save changes. Wait. Wait. There's a problem. Permissions, invite, permissions, overview. Remove tag. Then add this. Save. There you go. Birth strategy, new argument, base argument, updated argument. I'll change this one to updated argument plus abortion plus birth strategy. Birth strategy. Okay, birth strategy, and argues that the birth strategy. My God, the birth strategy is saddled with a dilemma. Ooh, if birth creates a morally meaningful change, that explains why infanticide is impermissible, despite newborns resembling late-term fetuses. Then proponents of birth strategy must either accept that non-therapeutic late-term abortions are impermissible or not. Judging the late-term non-therapeutic abortions are impermissible undermines the birth strategy. I should record this part, so I'll go over that again, but I'll record it so I can then use it as a clip of some sort to explain what birth strategies are. Boom. Okay. Red ball, a message. Contract down here. Full. You can't debate. Go going to your dime. The left. Yeah. Okay. If you laugh, you go to hell. Okay, what am I looking at? Okay, I'll record this part. Just for the record, start recording. Okay. Christopher A. Barber and Adam has called this group of views birth strategies and argue that the birth strategy is saddled with a dilemma. If birth creates a morally meaningful change that explains why infanticide is impermissible despite newborns resembling late-term fetuses, then proponents of the birth strategy must either accept that non-therapeutic late-term abortions are impermissible or not. Judging that late-term non-therapeutic abortions are impermissible undermines the birth strategy because the birth is supposed to be differentiated the moral status of infanticide and the moral status of abortion. Boom. Anyways, this could be avoided if non-therapeutic late-term abortions were permissible, but Bobber and the other guy, I can't pronounce his name, Almelkianchuk, take the judgment that non-therapeutic late-term abortions are permissible to be unacceptable. Barber and defend the claim that non-therapeutic late-term abortions are impermissible with an appeal to the principle that it is morally impermissible to deprive a non-threatening human being of a fundamental good like life, a good on which all other human goods are based, without sufficient reason. Based on this principle, they claim the judgment that non-therapeutic late-term abortions are impermissible is stronger than any principle that could be used as premises in arguments for the opposite conclusion. And if proponents of the birth strategy are to defend themselves, they need to explain why non-therapeutic late-term abortions are permissible. Walter Viet contends that Bobbier and the other guy dilemma is entirely grounded in intuitions about the inherent sanctity of life at the final stages of pregnancy. And because it relies too heavily on intuition without further reasons, it is inadequately justified. Such appeals to intuition and common sense is often confused, at odds with itself, and sometimes derived by psychological processes that are not truth tracking. Oh, we have a new word. I've not heard of the word truth tracking. I'll look it up. I might add it to my vocab, like my words of vocabs I want to learn. Truth tracking definition of knowledge, Robert. No, truth tracking definition of knowledge, what itself, beliefs, sensitivity. I'm going to add that to the definitions of words I want to learn. Logical log. Okay. I should have a vocab section. A vocab. All the interesting terms that I want to learn. It's just going to be the case that you don't understand what you're saying. Truth tracking. And it's just, and you don't seem to understand. Okay, what? Truth tracking. This is not to say that intuitions are always irrelevant, but without further reasons, mere intuitions may not supply a stable foundation to support the proposed dilemma. In response, Viet, Boiber, and the other guy maintain that it is not objectable from these bases their dilemma on intuition because they ground what they take it to be their commonly shared intuition on their normative principle. They maintain that those with different intuitions will still have to explain why their normative principle should be denied. Still have to explain why their This response is inadequate because Bobbier and Umlikchuk or something like that present a double standard regarding what can be accepted or rejected on the basis of intuition. Why would a different intuition be insufficient for denying their principle? One could simply reject their principle on the basis of different intuition. This would mirror their difference of their principle. If such a defense would require further explanation, as Boybier and the other guy claims it would, then it must be that mere intuition is insufficient reason to deny their principle. But why then would mere intuition be sufficient reason to accept their principle, if those with different intuitions would still need to explain why their normative principle should be denied? Then Boybier and the other guy will also need to explain why it should be accepted. But as Viet explains, they do not do this, and so their dilemma is diffused because there is no further reason beyond intuition to accept the normative principle on which their dilemma is based. Nevertheless, there is further explanation for why their normative principle should be rejected, meaning that the birth tragedy is not troubled by Biabir's or Oma, the other guy, dilemma anyways. This is for a reason, two reasons. First, it's not clear that non-therapeutic late-term abortions violate their principle. It is not clear that fetuses are non-threatening human beings with fundamental human good-like lives. This is because fetuses in pregnancies for which abortion are sought are not non-threatening. Instances of pregnancies for which abortions are sought are instances of unwanted pregnancies. Unwanted pregnancies constitute a threat to the pregnant person because that person will suffer great costs against their will if it's not terminated. As discussed, their costs include but are not limited to physical pain, risk of mortality, irrevocable changes to one's body, economic costs from pregnancy and childbirth, and the coercive circumstances, and it is the presence of the fetus that creates these coercive circumstances. Thus, fetuses in pregnancies for which abortions are sought are not non-threatening. Therefore, abortion, including non-therapeutic late-term abortions, if entail deprivation of a fundamental human good like life, entails depriving of good like life, and so does not violate Berber's and the other guy's principle. Second, even if fetuses are non-threatening, Thompson's argument already explains the permissibility of late-term abortions, as the earlier explanation of Thompson's core argument and the reason shows. Late-term abortions, including non-therapeutic ones, are morally permissible for the same reason that all other abortions are permissible, regardless of whether a fetus is non-threatening human being with a formulation, human good like life has a right to life, is in later stages of development or the circumstances and conditions of the pregnancy. A fetus has no entitlement to use and occupy another's body or force anyone into undertaking parenthood, because people retain not only a right to bodily autonomy, but right to concerning claims that constitute their general autonomy over their lives or selves, especially the right to choose parenthood. Thus all abortions, whether therapeutic or not, regardless of whether a fetus is non-threatening human being with a right to life, the stages of pregnancy or the circumstances and conditions of the pregnancy are permissible, neither depriving any fetus of use of anyone. Why am I talking like this? Of another's body, nor avoiding, because apparent to the child, a fetus would become deprived of anything it has right in virtue of having a right to life. Booyah! We're one step closer, because fetuses in unwanted pregnancies are not non-threatening, and permissibility of non-therapeutic late-term abortions is already explained. The alleged dilemma for the birth pregnancy is readily resolved. As I argue, the birth strategy unsuccessfully shows that revisiting Thompson's argument to take seriously the right to choose parenthood addresses problematic analogies between the situation of pregnant persons having an abortion and parent committing infanticide of their newborn, such that the argument is permissible and infanticide is not. Mm, interesting. Oh my god, let's go. Oh my god, you are so like awesome, dude. Like, dude, I almost got my I almost got sad for a second. I clicked on the link and I was checking through the fill paper, and I was like, oh, this argument's pretty decent. And you know what? Even though I don't agree with it because of my own beliefs, because I believe in well-being and stuff like that, but I mean, the argument stands on its own. It makes a good point, for its own reasons. But I was seeing that someone had made a counter to the whole paper, but the owner of this paper made a counter to the counter. That's odd. That and dude, that's awesome. Oh my god, that is crazy. I like it when an author does that. Fight back. Someone said that the breaker doesn't work. I don't know. Take seriously infanticide, abortion permissibility. The adoption objection. The argument from right to choose parenthood that I present faces an objecting scenario. Adoption. One may contend that the burdens of parenthood could just as easily be avoided by going through with the pregnancy and childbirth, but then placing the newborn up for adoption rather than having an abortion. Oh my god, this is such a good paper. Dude, I am fangirling over the author. There's some okay, these are, okay. Stop fangirling. This is not cool, okay? One may contend that the burdens of parenthood could just as easily be avoided by going through with pregnancy and childbirth. I think Nathan Nobis already tried to make a counter to this adoption thing. He says it's begging the question. Circular is begging the question. Circular. Okay, it's begging the question because if we're gonna say why not just go through adoption, we're already presuming that abortion is gonna be the wrong option without proving why abortion is gonna be the wrong option. Therefore, you're just begging the question. But I wonder how they're gonna just reply to this one. Anyways, the argument from the right to choose parenthood that I present faces an objection concerning adoption. One may contend that the burdens of parenthood could just as easily be avoided by going through with pregnancy and childbirth, but then placing the newborn up for adoption rather than having an abortion. By placing the newborn up for adoption, one gives up being a parent and therefore would not have to endure the burdens of parenthood, because the burden in which a pregnant person has arranged for some other party to adopt the child to whom they will eventually give birth are especially relevant here. In such cases, the pregnant person does not become a parent at birth, because there is an understanding that it is the adoptive parents who take on parenthood once the child is born. It may thus be argued that the availability of planned adoptions or adoption in general are a method for pregnant person to avoid parenthood is a problem for my argument. However, its success as an objection depends upon the availability of adoption, implying the permissibility of choosing adoption over abortion over adoption, but there is no such implications. The availability of adoption as a way for a pregnant person to avoid parenthood does not make abortion impermissible. While it is true that the burden of parenthood could be avoided by giving one newborn up for adoption, it is not morally obligatory to choose adoption over abortion. This is because the choice to have an abortion, even when adoption is an available option, does not deprive the fetus of anything it has a right to in virtue of having a right to life, and does not violate its right to life. Because the right to life is a negative right, it does not include the right to have your life preserved, meaning it does not include the right to have someone continue with an unwanted pregnancy so that the future child can be put up for adoption. The choice to abort in order to avoid, because the right to life is a negative right and does not include the right to be preserved, meaning it does not include the right to have someone continue with an unwanted pregnancy so the future child can be put up for adoption. The choice to abort in order to avoid the burdens of parenthood, even when one could accomplish the same by going through with pregnancy and birth, and the putting the newborn up for adoption is thus permissible as it does not violate the fetus's right to life. Where am I? Hein for Common provides a similar argument concerning alternatives to abortion, but consider the case of partial ectogenestation rather than adoption. Ectogenestation is a process by which gestating. Oh my god, I gotta look this up. First time vocab. Gestating is a term coined by philosopher Elizabeth Cole Romanis to describe a human being that is developing in an artificial womb outside of a biological body. Ayo, China. The term differentiates the entity for traditional fetus, which inside a pregnant person, and a newborn, which is complete necessary psychological adaptation of the world is the environment. Okay. Artificial wombs. Develops in an artificial womb. For Hein, the right to abortion is a particular instance of just general right to concern the removal procedure and is a right to choose procedure by which a fetus is removed and the timing of its removal. Transferring a fetus to an artificial womb would avoid the death of the fetus, but choosing an abortion over transfer would not be unjust, for the fetus lacks the requisite right to make the death of the fetus unjust. As already discussed, the right to life is not sufficient in this case because it is not the right to be preserved, so a pregnant person is not obligated to transfer the fetus to an artificial womb, nor is the fetus entitled to being being transferred. Thus, the availability of alternative methods of avoiding the burdens of parenthood, such as adoption or transfer to an artificial womb, does not make choosing abortion impermissible. Instead of implying that abortion is impermissible, the availability of an option to have one's newborn adopted, such as through planned adoption, is simply another way a pregnant person may choose to avoid parenthood. The existence of this option does not mean that abortion is not also a permissible option. The right to choose parenthood includes the right to choose whether to avoid parenthood by planning for one's newborn to be adopted once born, or by having an abortion. The right to choose parenthood includes the right to choose whether to avoid parenthood by planning. Okay, as both are methods for that same end. But only is abortion a permissible option. It may be better. One, this is because there are other burdens associated with adoption route. The proposed of avoiding parenthood is avoidable significant burden. So burden because one faces significant burdens anyways. Then purpose. What? The purpose of avoiding parenthood is to avoid significant burdens, but if one faces significant burdens anyways, then the purpose is defeated. For instance, assesses both frequency in which women seeking abortion consider adoption and this decision satisfaction among adoption patients. They find the most women do not seriously consider adoption as an option when it comes to reproductive choices. 91% of women who sought an abortion but ended up giving birth to undertake parenthood rather give their newborn up to adoption. The fact that a vast majority of women who seek abortion but cannot secure them choose parenthood over adoption shows that forcing someone into parenthood from a pregnancy which abortion would sought by denying them abortion will most likely result in them undertaking parenthood. This is precisely what they sought to avoid. Adoption is therefore not a workable solution. avoiding the burdens of parenthood, because when it comes to time to commit to this decision, it is highly unlikely that the birth mothers will choose adoption, even if their pregnancies were unwanted and they sought an abortion and did not previously want to become parents. Importantly, Sisson finds that adoption is often the last option pregnant women seek to avoid parenthood consider. It is almost always considered only when access to abortion is restricted, thus suggests that the choice to place one newborn up for adoption is seldom a free, autonomous choice, as it often made only when other options are restricted. One may press that just because an adoption is seldom choice does not mean that abortion is a permissible option. It could be contended that those who sought abortions but could not get them and gave birth and chose adoption instead made the right decision, unlike those who had an abortion. But this neglect to consider explanations as to why adoption is seldom chosen. In the Sisson study, those who were denied abortion and undertook parenthood after giving birth reported they chose parenthood over adoption because adoption became unimaginable to them after feeling a bond with their newborn upon giving birth. The emergence of this post-birth bond suggests that childbirth is transformative experience and underscores a significant harm associated with adoption. It is traumatic for someone to give up their child to which whom they have a bond that is so strong they find severing it is unimaginable, even if they did not want to have a child in the first place. In such cases, choosing adoption poses serious harms, and many who choose adoption express grief and unhappiness about their decision. This harm would explain why undertaking parenthood is almost always chosen over adoption. Even when avoiding parenthood was originally sought, this means that adoption is not a good option for those who wish to avoid significant burdens, because either they will choose to undertake parenthood and suffer from the burdens of parenthood they sought to avoid, or they will suffer from the harms of grief and the unhappiness of severing a bond that emerges from the transformative experience of birth, in which case they suffer anyways. Abortion does not have these problems, unlike adoption. Having an adoption does not require going through the same sort of transformative experience that put one in a position to suffer these harms. Because of this, abortion of a pregnancy unlike adoption, having an abortion does not require going through the same sort of transformative experience that puts one in a position to suffer these harms. Because of this, aborting the pregnancy is not always permissible, even when adoption is an available option, but may be a better way of avoiding significant burdens in some cases, because it avoids both burdens of becoming and being a parent and the harms of having sever the bonds whose breaking the feeling unimaginable leads to grief and unhappiness. Dun 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 dun. Conclusion. Having examined the details of Thompson's argument to show that it runs into a new problem of an analogy between abortion and infanticide, Dragon Ball, based on parallel arguments from reasoning about contours of a right to life, I conclude that Thompson's argument can be revised to successfully address this new analogy by recognizing the right to choose parenthood, because undertaking parenthood is not obligatory. It is permissible to choose not to undertake it, such by having an abortion. Following Thompson reasoning about contours of right to life, a fetus right to life does not entail a right to have anyone enter personhood or surrender the right to choose parenthood and become a parent to the child that the fetus would become. Abortion is permissible because a parent to the child that the fetus would become. Abortion is I'm reading the same thing. Sometimes the words merge together too much. was not violate the future threat because blah blah blah. Anything is the right to in virtue of having the right to life, recognizing the ethical relevance of choosing parenthood, the ethical blah blah blah, our responsibility, nature of parenthood, impermissible of infanticide. Parenthood is a relevant relation status entangled with special moral obligation. Parent responsibilities include ensuring well-being of one's newborn, meaning a parent committing the infanticide of their newborn is impermissible. No one is obligated to undertake parenthood, but once one does undertake parenthood and becomes a parent, they are obligated for parental responsibilities. Thus, by recognizing the right to choose parenthood as important consideration relevant to the ethics of abortion and acknowledging the moral nature of parenthood, Thompson's argument can be revised to successfully address the challenges of analogy between abortion and infanticide and maintain that abortion is morally permissible while infanticide is not. Now that would be good for the server. Okay, should be placed. The read time was more like an hour and 20 minutes, but if I were to shorten it, it would be an hour, or it would be an hour